Well, I mentioned that this office is a manifesto itself, but the abstraction of this is the idea, the concept of the circular fit-out. What role does circular design play in fostering sustainability and culture in the workplace? I think there's a lot to say about this, and probably we want to start with Lee, in no particular order. Ron, if you want.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for honoring us with a wonderful film. I guess for us, when we started to think about circularity, and we've been thinking about it for quite some time with the work that PLP Labs has been doing, we came to the realization that everything we have been doing as a profession for many, many years as architects was what we call extractive. So we extract minerals, resources from the earth. We use more energy to manufacture them and to make them customized for our buildings. And then we use even more energy to transport them, and then to erect them and to build them, and then to operate them. And that constant level of extraction and never putting something back into the earth has obviously had a profound impact on the earth, as we can see now. And you know, I think we all here feel that climate change is probably one of the most pressing issues that we need to address as a profession and the things we do. So the idea of circularity then tries to limit that constant repetition of extracting from the earth. So because now we can take things and we can reuse them, or we can reapply them, or we can upcycle them, and we can, or we can give them another use. And it doesn't have to necessarily place another burden on the earth by doing it. In fact, it takes a bit of a burden off. So that's where the big principle for us comes from.
That's a good starting point. Ron.
Oh, he'll have a much better answer.
It depends a bit on which question you want to answer, because there are many questions, and we've been sort of posing the questions ourselves for a long time, 30 years or something, and the questions kind of came from us, and our clients were not so interested. And that situation is reversed completely. It's now our clients who are asking for answers that have to do with the bigger picture around buildings in terms of carbon and energy and material use and circularity. And the question is broadened all the time over the years. We have spent decades making buildings more energy efficient, and we're kind of finding in this part of Europe that job's done. You know, we have plenty renewable area to make those very energy efficient buildings that we design these days function without adding very much. That doesn't mean the problems have been solved, because the construction industry still accounts for some 40% or something of the world's carbon problem. And the carbon is directly related to climate change and to the disasters that are happening more and more often and more regularly around the planet. And this has put us kind of on a track where we have to reassess our relationship with the planet. It's been quite easy for us for the last 150 years to work against nature, protect ourselves against bacteria and the weather, and make buildings that are very kind of human-centered. And what we're now trying to reverse that process by, or enrich the process by allowing nature back at the table to talk. and we need to listen to nature. And there are some really good tips. It's actually really unhealthy to be in spaces that are sanitized and made out of flat, clean materials. It's not. Buildings should be much more part of our biome to make us function better as human beings. So kind of the extrapolation of all these ideas that we've been talking about through our building designs and to people, to our clients, they are developing into an area where we will be living more and more in tandem with nature. There'll be more green in cities. It'll be a normal idea that buildings become part of our physical biomes. And I think that's super cool. It has a really good effect on people's moods and on well-being. Nature is, after all, something that we've, as a species, evolved with. You know, we grew up in the forest. And it's a really important step to see that in the light of the planet and in the light of the architecture and the spaces that we make.
Thank you. You open the discussion on several points. Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I was kind of responsible here for the design of the fit out for the office that we moved into. And I'd say that my definition of a circular fit out, well, I'd say in one word, it means opportunity. And I'll get to that in a second, but it's really about, and I touched on it in the film, but it's about maximizing reuse and minimizing waste. And what I mean by opportunity is that I think we all need to make a concerted effort, and this was a kind of mental mind shift that I underwent going through this project, but identifying what we consider waste, redefining what that means, right? So redefining what waste means and what our perceived value of different goods that we have and that we live with and that we work with. So that was probably the biggest challenge, but I think if you're able to have that mindset and shift, right, from what is perceived waste, what is perceived value, then you've opened up loads of opportunity. So that's kind of where I at least see the definition of what a circular fit out means at this scale.
Anna, would you agree? What's your point?
Yeah, I of course agree with all of them, and I guess to add to that and a bit in line with what everyone, but also Ron was saying, is thinking about circularity also as creating regenerative systems and systems, ecosystems that thrive, that make people thrive, and that make nature thrive. And for a really long time, we've seen buildings as static products, no? And we need to start seeing buildings as living systems, I think, that adapt, evolve, and interact with the environment. And also something important for me about circularity that we maybe talk less is its social value. I think it's very important to think about if circularity is creating resilience and equality in a space or is not. And I have concerns of, okay, here in the global north, we want to be very circular, so we import a lot of materials and we extract a lot of materials, and we are basically repeating the same systems of colonization that we've been doing all over and over, no? So it's about creating systems that thrive for both nature and people, I think, and creating that social value also.
Thank you. Next topic. Okay, so the idea is all together now, and one could think all together now back in the office, but the topic is more about all together now in approaching how to design and create the fit out of the office in the different phase of its creation and realization. So the partnering with contractors, suppliers, and consultants, what I usually call the creative table and the technical table that makes the architecture possible. It reminds me the same with the idea of the circular layout. Starting here, Michael.
Sure. So generally, I'd say that there's been an incredible amount of engagement and excitement from suppliers and contractors. And I think, you know, for this project in specific, from the onset, we were engaged with a number of suppliers that I must mention. So Solid Ceramics, who helped us collaborate and make these beautiful terrazzo worktops from our own waste and from all of these different buildings that you see here. That's all just old material that we took and we crushed up and we've turned it into a key feature. To Makonda, who is a leader and pioneer within the London community in terms of material passporting. So that was really an eye-opening experience for myself. So effectively, for those that don't know what material passporting is that you have a carbon value associated or associated against any sort of item. And in doing that, we were able to catalog every single thing that was in our previous space and everything that we took with us and the things that we left behind or we reused or we donated, sold, so on, and even the new things here. So in doing that, we were able to get really accurate measurement and data on our own circular fit out, right? So that was quite key. And then of course there's our contractor method, who I must shout out, because even from the onset of demolition, there was a really conscious effort to try to, if a material could not be reused, could it at least be recycled? And that's how we kind of looked at the circularity or this kind of circle, so to speak, right? I think we went from, do we really want it? And if we evaluated and said that we didn't, can someone else reuse it? And if someone else doesn't really have an interest in that, well, can we at least donate it? And if donation is also off the table, then we look at recycling it. So all the way back down to landfill being our last and our only, that's like kind of our emergency backup scenario, right? So we really tried to prioritize reuse and recycling before anything else. And I think it was through our contractors and suppliers that really helped us do that.
Thank you. Anna.
Well, I was not engaged in this project of refitting the office, but I have collaborated for many years with PLP Architecture, and I have collaborated with my head of academia. And I think collaboration is really, really important and can bring lots of powerful outcomes that don't happen without collaboration. And so we all come from different backgrounds, and in this case, I'm talking about academia and seeing more maybe the research part of a project. With practice, they see the implementation, the innovation, and together we can really make a difference, I think. And there's challenges like aligning time frames, aligning language, expectations, and so on. But we've done many projects, so through Cambridge and the Center for Natural Material Innovation, with PLP doing skyscrapers and also doing flexible partitions for housing and pavilions and so on. And they've been really successful, and I think the basis of that is because we really worked together, co-designed and collaborated, instead of seeing others as external consultants. So I've never been a member of the staff of PLP, but I've always felt like one and super welcoming and so on. And I think that's what makes PLP such a special place to collaborate with and to work with.
Lee.
So I'll give a more general perspective. I think there's a perception that sustainable practices are more expensive. And therefore, lots of people just don't do them, right? And in the particular instance of our home, or this office, that was not the case. In some other instances, it is at the moment. But the point I think that I'm trying to make is that through collaboration and through innovation and through more and more people driving this, these kinds of things will become opportunities. They'll become commercial opportunities. And therefore, they'll be seen as ways for people to actually build a stronger economy, right? You see a big transformation in our economy now, and in technology. But there's a transformation going on in the economies that we're surrounded with, in terms of sustainability, circularity, reuse, and opportunities around innovative new materials that use less energy and lose less carbon. And the more we do it, and the more we promote it, the more commodified they're going to be, and the more commonplace it's going to become. So we need to do that, and that's a necessity for the profession and for all of the collaborators around it.
I think that's a pretty important point. Ron, what do you think?
Totally. And there's a changing appetite in the financial markets as well. There is an interest in creating green economies. And there's even a little bit, and I love working with the younger people in the office who are actually 2 generations removed from me, and their outlook on life, because it's a weird time to be young, I feel, because there's so much hopelessness, and the solutions to our problems are sometimes obscure. Where do we go, and what do we do to survive this century on this planet? And there's actually a slow change in the necessity of property and the necessity of money. And money is there are richer ways of looking at life than just focusing on property and on finance. And there seems to be. I read this morning an interesting article in the New York Times about the fellow who designed the iPhone, and he's buying up whole large parts of San Francisco. And it's not a real estate deal. He's not into creating value through his investment in real estate. He believes in really good neighborhoods, and he believes in communities, and he believes in children growing up and borrowing a lot of their identity from the places that they grew up in. And those are values that I think are, in the end, much more important to our value of life, and frankly more than money, And I get that sense when I walk around the office. There is something about the way the place feels, which is very eye-opening in a way, and I feel totally comfortable here, and I think a lot of my colleagues feel that too. And that is a combination of philosophical issues. It's a combination of the knowledge about sustainability. It's a combination of the pain and suffering that young Michael had to go through, getting this all organized and together. And it's reflected in the atmosphere. It's reflected in the way we work here. I'm sure we're going to do better work here than we did in our old place. I'm quite sure. Yeah.
Actually,
Thank you. Next topic. Okay, so from local to global. I've always thought that the stream can go both ways, because architecture has to have a local approach, but architecture is also global. So there has to be a balance at the end where you don't miss the place where you design, but you also understand the opportunities of a global approach and a wider scale perspective. And this is the point, how circular fit out can be scaled to a wider approach, starting from your vision. So I would say I would start with Lee.
So I think part of my answer wasn't my answer to your previous question, but for us, we've gone from a company, a studio that when we started, we had 85% of our work basically in London. And today, 85% of our work is outside of London, is in other parts of the world. And as I alluded to before, we learned a lot from living in a place like this and living in and working in Europe, which was our home base for a long time. And it created a set of values for us. And so now, when we talk about things like circularity and we talk about those things, we actually find that particularly in Asia, there is a huge interest and appetite for these sort of things right now. I sit on a board of a company in India, and what they're doing environmentally and around circularity and around energy and all this, it's just astonishing to see. And I don't think there are many Western companies that have accomplished in a short period of time what they have. And this keeps, we keep seeing this everywhere in the conversations that we're having. So I feel that the opportunity is quite big and can be applied anywhere. And there's already quite a big appetite for this. I think if you look at Japan and other places where we're very busy, Singapore, the idea of reuse is now becoming a big topic. I mean, when you get into a situation where interest rates rise and the cost of construction inflation in Japan is 5% per month. And the reason being because the Japanese government went into the semiconductor business. But what it means is that people are now looking at, what do I do? Because I can't get a contractor, I can't build something. So the default position is reuse, rethink and reuse of buildings. And so that's becoming a big topic in countries. Singapore has this incredible collection of tropical modern architecture. They tear it down all the time. We've been talking to them about keeping it because our work there is sort of a take on contemporary tropical modernism. So I think the answer is it's coming more and more around the world.
Ron.
Yeah, I agree. And but the cool thing about our studio is that we don't only work in many places. We come from all of these places too, and it's London is like that. London has been a magnet for talent, global talent, for a long time, because of its schools and because of the markets. A lot of markets are served from London, and that gives us not only a good influx of talented people, it also means we get to export good ideas, and it's not so much that that these are British ideas that are planted in countries where we work, but they come out of an international conversation. We learn as much from other parts of the world as we bring back to other parts of the world. So it's a beneficial process for mankind, I think, in a way, to have this kind of international collaboration, which it is. And if the ideas of sustainability and carbon and energy saving and better places for people's mental and physical health come from anywhere, we will grab them and we will put them in buildings because they're good. They're all good aspects of really good buildings. And our chance here as architects is that we're not testing new materials in garden sheds, or in academia. We are working on very large-scale corporate projects that are very expensive, and we're convincing our clients and cities to be enriching the architecture with ideas that are good for the planet. And I think if we can scale that up, that is very important for the world at this moment, and it's an educational value. So international ideas are often, the grass is greener on the other side. It's really nice to learn from places that you understand slightly less.
Agreed, Anna.
So I think localization is becoming more and more important. I think we need to look. We've seen what globalization has done to the world, and we now need to look at local resources, local cultures, local needs, and even more so with the head of designers. And what needs to be scaled is, as Ron was saying, ideas and systems. So, for example, it's what we are doing at Cambridge Transformation Labs. What we do is looking at architecture from a whole ecosystem perspective. So from forests, what can we grow on a country? What products can we take out of what grows there and thrives there? How can we train local communities, create local industry, and work with communities, co-designing their houses, schools, and so on. So I think what we need to scale up is systems, ideas, and what we need to scale down is resources, engaging communities, and so on.
Michael.
So I guess in the instance of our own office, and just to touch on what Lee and Ron are talking about as well, I think reuse and reuse initiatives are still in their infancy in a way. So I think for us, we wanted a means for this space to be a tester or a demonstrator, a kind of hub where we could learn, take those learnings, and then apply them at scale, right? Apply them across not just local regions, but globally and at all sorts of scales, be it a building or a master plan. So I think that's really what we set out in designing this space, is could we achieve that without having to make any of the sacrifices to the design in any way? And we were able to do that. We still were able to push those key principles that we believe in, be it creating a social space or a collaborative space, a space that promotes health and well-being, all with the driving force of circularity and sustainability on our side, right? And so I think it's a bit of a call of action that I would say, which is that I think it starts with us, it starts with architects, it starts with designers. We were very privileged in this instance we were our own client when it came to this space, so I could see how scaling up in a project where there is a client, there might be some hurdles or some road bumps, but it's these sort of opportunities for us to learn from them and educate each other, right? If there are more practices that are doing things like this, we can learn from each other, and in turn, we can better inform the other people that sit on that other side of the table, be it clients or investors or the general public.
I agree, and I think we'll elaborate on that in our next topic, so let's see it. So I think there's a lot to say here. From asset to relational place, the new language of the office. How to overcome the old barriers of workplace, projecting towards a dynamic, welcoming space open to change. Well, I would say that with this question, we're not saying that architecture should not be an asset. Architecture will always be an asset. The point is understanding which are the key factors to evaluate architecture as an asset. And here probably it has to be understood that well-being, comfort, and the ability of architecture to create relation are true values to consider it as a good asset. Here we have an incredibly large atrium, which could be considered a loss of square meters, but I would say it is the one thing that creates the value and the opportunity of this space to be as amazing and welcoming and valuable as it is, just as an example. So starting from here, Michael.
Yeah, I think we touched on this when we were touring around earlier. And so my brother is a developer, and he was just in a few days ago with a few of his developer buddies. And the first thing that they remarked on was, look at all of that atrium space that is just sacrificed to be nothing. What are you doing with that? That's 18, 15 meters here. You could surely push that in and generate far more money for your value right now. And the funny thing is actually, so when we were in Ibex's house, which is our previous office just around the corner, there was a handful of us that would actually come and eat lunch downstairs, not knowing that we were moving to this office at all, but because it was one of those enclosed public spaces that gives back to the community and adds value in itself by just being there, right? It was an opportunity for us to get out of the office on a cold day because our previous space didn't have such a thing, but a place for people to gather. So in a sense, you know, our office now is, it's a funny way of putting it, but almost three-dimensional in a way, because people either eat here during lunch, or they eat at one of the tables, or they eat downstairs. And I think what that means in terms of the design for this space is that we wanted to actually, so disregard what a developer would say. We wanted to give back as much free space, free social space, breakout space, collaborative space, not just workspace, to everyone that works here. And I think in doing that, you can see if you go around later, but you know, we've created a kind of dual circulation, so you not just only circulate across the atrium, but you can circulate around the facade as well. And we've utilized the columns on the side to create breakout spaces and have informal meetings. These are all things that, you know, are quite simple and straightforward, but we didn't actually have in our previous space. So there's a funny kind of catch-22 of, yes, it's valuable real estate, but actually human emotion. Does it make people more productive? Does it make people more happy? And I would argue that it does, giving them more space.
Emma.
Yes, I totally agree with everything that Michael has said. I think in the past we haven't considered human well-being at all, or social value, and I think it's an incredibly important asset for everybody's everyday life, no? And working on an environment such as this office, which is amazing, which supports people encountering each other, supports conversations, conversation supports new things happening, new thoughts, more creativity, but also the natural materials, the plants, the biophilia, makes people feel good. As Ron was saying, I feel good working here, no? That enhances creativity, inspires people, and you create a space that people are happy to come and work. And I think that's really, really important. And they've done an amazing job here in achieving that.
Thank you, Lee.
I don't have much to add, but I would say that, you know, we generally, architects, work with industries that are notoriously slow to change. And as a result, the level of frustration that you get trying to do very, very innovative things for 30 years is you get frustrated to a quite high level. but eventually they change, and in retrospect, they recognize that they were right and you were always wrong. So I think the point is that what we do collaboratively with other engineers and others, and we create environments that actually people spend a lot of time in. If you think about a school, how many hours a day a young person spends inside a school every single day, that environment impacts that person's formative years. You know, I remember going to school, and I still remember the giant U-shaped, fan-shaped light fixtures that inspired me, you know, when I was a young child. Because I stared at them all day because I wasn't staring at the lessons. So I think we shape, we have a big impact on people and their lives and their well-being, and to things that subliminally influence them. And, you know, so when we came to do this, when we saw this space, we sort of realized, well, there was an opportunity here to do to basically take a step in our growth that marked a change and that marked a transition. And our work has changed dramatically since we started, because our context of our work has changed dramatically, and because of the research and the interests that we've been doing that have influenced it. So I kind of felt, although I was trying to make the space, fill the space with more people, and I was talked out of that, I kind of, you know, I think we made the right choice and the right balance, and we can see it in the productivity, but also we can see it in, I never thought about it before, but it's a very hard place to get stressed in.
Ron.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to add that there are several things wrong in the world, and one of those is that we are thinking of the value of space in terms of square meters, or square feet, and how many people we can cram into it, and that is a total misconception. If you look at the way the world is going, there is more and more appreciation for people's personal contribution to a good discussion, and for good ideas. And hopefully we'll manage to talk our clients into recognizing this and pay us for really good ideas, because they don't, you know. If we design a fabulous building that changes the way they work, it improves their productivity, it makes their staff happier and more creative and more collaborative, then that is so much more valuable than designing a building that's just, you know, very efficient in floor plan use and the use of materials. So, and as soon as that value is recognized, then you can have discussions about what makes places better for people. And it's not how many square meters per person, it's not. I think more square meters per person makes them happier and more productive, but that's you know. And don't forget that most of the workspace in the world is based on Victorian workshops, you know, where people sit at a position with a machine, either a tool machine or a calculator or a typewriter or something, and they are supposed to do that. It's person and machine, you know, talking to each other, which is a really unnatural situation. So now that the machines can work by themselves, we have to talk to each other. And it turns out that that is really good for the values that companies create. And the more, I think, of the work is going to be done by automation and AI, the more value will be assigned to good conversations and creative ideas and collaboration. And then you need to make space for that to happen. And then we need to be paid for it, because we still get paid for drawings, you know. You do so many drawings, you get so much money, and it's totally wrong. Big building, big set of drawings. We should be paid for really good ideas.
I agree. That's a good point. Well, I would like to close with one consideration, with one question, which is going back to the circular fit out and the strength of the ideas of including in architecture more and more recycling and reusing and readapting. How are you seeing the client's point of view? Do you find easily common ground with them? Are they open to this approach? What's the relationship with them on this topic as of now? Michael.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, we were our own client for this space, so we were quite fortunate in not having that natural pushback that you might have. But I think, you know, it really does start with us proving these ideas, because, as I've mentioned, reuse is very much in its infancy in many ways. But, you know, since learning about it, I keep coming across another supplier that's just launched a reuse initiative in ironmongery, or one that's doing something in flooring systems, or one that's trying to integrate it into joinery and woodworking and so on. So, you know, if I was to do this all over again, I would engage and double down on far more suppliers and welcome them as a means to collaborate and design a fit out, but also what that means for a building, what that means in adaptive reuse project for an entire building or a master plan. Are there innovative ways to think about our definition of waste? And can we flip it on its head and turn that into opportunity in some form or another?
My perspective comes more from academia, but also from working a lot with communities, and I think it's a lot about teaching and informing. Many times I get people don't want to live in a timber building. Well, have you asked the people? Have you told them the benefits? Have you showed them what a building made out of engineered timber looks like? So there's a lot of perceptions that we as architects and designers need to show by example, as Michael was saying, and need to teach about the benefits, show them how it looks, and yes, show them how it's done and teach them. And I think that changes a lot of minds and perspectives.
Lee and Ron.
I'm going to be very brief. There is architects operate in a funny. We have a funny relationship with reality. I'll tell you that, because we actually imagine worlds that are not real yet. So we're schooled at having ideas that are not quite functional in the real world yet. But we do talk to our clients about that, and part of the process is that we try and understand the realm that we operate in, because our buildings are for that realm. And currently our clients are very much engaged with the ideas of sustainability, circularity. They want to often for personal reasons, want to do the right thing. Also, they are judged on this by their peer groups and by their investors, and there's no corporate annual report that goes out without a few pages about how many SDGs have we hit this year, and if it's 5, it's not very good. If it's 8, it's getting better. And this has become a marketing tool in a way, but also it's a reflection of how the world around us is changing, and we are simply part of that change. And we might have good ideas that are a little bit out of the box, but they are part of that conversation. If they are not, then people won't know what we're talking about. So it's not us. I think it's a combination with our markets changing, our clients being very much more educated, and actually asking us and wanting us to do the things that we propose.
And just to add to that, there are 2 types of clients that are doing this. One is the group that knowingly is doing it because they think it's a good thing to be doing and they see some benefits. And then there's a group that are unknowingly doing it because they need to do it. and they need to do it because policies have changed. Policies, government policies, not just in London but all over the world, have changed, and they've forced people that build buildings, developers and other people, to hit certain targets and things like that. So, for example, that's the unknowing group. They have to do it, but they don't know why they have to do it, but they have to hit the policy or they can't do it. So we're able to take them on a journey. For example, we have a building here in London where we are no longer demolishing buildings, we're dismantling buildings now. It's a big difference, right? Because when you demolished it, you just crushed it all and took it to landfill. When you dismantle it, you start to look at each individual piece. What can I do with it? Where should it go? Is there a reuse, et cetera, et cetera. So on one that we're dismantling in the Mayfair area, we're going to reuse the stone from that building back on the new building. And then we have another client in Taiwan who's totally obsessed with doing a low carbon, low energy building, and she has no idea what it means. But she and we're constantly, so I'm looking at Dipsy because we're constantly talking to her, and she's like, oh, okay. But so as a consequence, we're using, recycled steel in her building and low carbon concretes that come from recycled content and all this sort of stuff. And we're using paper clad, all this sort of stuff because it makes it hit her targets. But she's doing it because she's passionate about it, and she hasn't hit the cost threshold yet. But I think on the policy side, the cost threshold doesn't matter so much because if you don't do it, you're just not going to be able to build your building. So there's quite a mix. But I think policies are good, but government should be incentivizing the industry to do these things. And that's what's missing. You'll get a lot more innovation, you'll get a lot more collaboration, you'll get a lot more reuse, you'll get a lot more of all these sort of things, and they'll become a new economy if people are incentivized to do it.
Well, thank you. I think that with this, it might be time to wrap up our conversation for tonight. So I would like to thank Lee Polizano, Ron Bakker, Michael Polizano, Anna Gattu for their thoughtful consideration, and you all that have been here this evening with us, everybody who has followed the conversation and the documentary remotely. The Architect series will continue with 3 episodes in October, November, and December. So we'll keep you posted and stay tuned. Thank you very much and good evening.